Mr. Ben Schaefer is currently an operator with Washington Regional SWAT, serving for nearly 7 years and has served in critical military and law enforcement roles for over 20 years. Specifically, Schaefer has experience in canine handling with multiple deployments, developing training programs for the United States Marine Corps and other private security firms. Thank you, Mr. Schaefer, for being here. These men are experts in the fields and professions incredibly relevant to the events of July 13th. I believe they'll be able to provide this forum and the American people with insights that have otherwise not been received and the attention they deserve. With that, I'll turn it over to our subject matter experts, beginning with Mr. Bongino for opening remarks.
Well, thanks for your time. Thank you for doing this. Sound okay? Everybody hear me back there? Yeah. Great, fantastic. Listen, let's just get right to the point. This was an apocalyptic security failure. A man was murdered in front of his family. 3 people were shot on live television, including President Trump in the head, who came within 2 millimeters of having his head explode on national television in front of millions of people. There's no sugarcoating it. It's no time for BS. Unfortunately, as Congressman Crane and Mills both indicated, the story seems to have been vanquished to the phantom zone of media coverage. It's amazing how we're still talking about JFK's assassination, but nobody seems to want to talk about President Trump being shot in the head on national television, despite the fact that we have no answers. So I have 5 minutes, so I want to keep it quick, and I want to make 3 points. I worked in the Secret Service for 12 years. I loved it. I worked with some really amazing men and women who gave everything. I mean, a couple of them literally gave everything. I know guys who've gotten bizarre diseases overseas, like chikungunya fever and protection operations. Everybody gave a little bit of something in the Secret Service, and it was a real honor to say I was part of it. But they have 3 institutional problems, I believe, in the macro will help us get to the bottom of how this Secret Service apocalyptic failure won't happen again. First, they have a technology problem. The joke in the Secret Service, which is sadly no longer funny when I was there, and it wasn't funny then either, is they rely on yesterday's technology tomorrow. Think about that. Yesterday's technology tomorrow. Everything from computer systems that waste agents' times, filling out time and attendance records they were doing, to Congressman Crane and I discussing the fact that they only implemented slings, a technology as old as the wheel, about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years into my time in the Secret Service, which is embarrassing. The weaponry was old, everything was old. These are things I would have talked about sooner if they didn't create a security crisis, and I obviously didn't want to air them publicly. Now you're seeing what happens when you don't have a drone up at a site you could have bought for $39.99 on Amazon. Second, another adage in the Secret Service, you've heard even the new acting director discuss, is the more with less approach. There is no more with less, there's less with less, okay? The Secret Service more with less approach only works if you produce more. That's how capitalism works. You produce a flat screen TV that was probably 20 years ago, $10,000. It's $200 at Walmart now. They produce a better TV with less. That's not what the Secret Service did. They produced less with more. They were given more money and produced less. A 20-year-old criminal outsmarted them on a $40 drone technology piece of device. You're telling me that's more with less? That's disgusting. That's nothing with less. That's less with more. Their budget went up. You guys know you're appropriators. You know that. Third, and I'll wrap it up with this, turn it over to Mr. Prince. The investigative mission, the Secret Service, that they're telling you they need to make them better agents is total crap. That's garbage. Their agents are talented, smart people. They can figure out how to do protection without running out cheap $20 counterfeit notes at 7-Eleven on a Friday night while the president's getting shot in the head. How is it we have a DEA, we have an FBI, we have TIGTA, the IRS, CBP, and 1,000 other entities with a $6 trillion budget, which I know a lot of you guys have been fighting against this grotesque spending. $3 billion goes to the Secret Service, and we're wasting time running out counterfeit notes. It's a serious problem, counterfeiting. Granted, it might be a legacy item. They started doing counterfeiting. That's not what we do now. Get rid of the investigative mission, turn it over to other people, let them do what they do best and should do best. Protection. Thanks a lot for your time. Thank you for doing this. Thanks to the panelists as well and everyone attending. Appreciate
it. We're here today to discuss a tragedy for the United States of America that could have been the catalyst in the destruction of our republic. World War I started with botched diplomatic security. the assassination of one party's leading candidate a mere 4 months before the election, at minimum would have unleashed unimaginable chaos and violence. The cancerous rot of unaccountability has metastasized throughout our entire body politic. Our obscene levels of government waste ooze like a gelatinous mold across society. Our borders, so porous they are reminiscent of a spring flood tide. The security apparatus suffers failure upon failure globally. Our enemies mocking us even while the permanent deep state has weaponized the justice system and delivers a Soviet style of lawfare. In the case of Butler, Pennsylvania, only the disinfectant of transparency and accountability will start to repair the cascading errors that led to the tragedy. In analyzing tragic events, Gray's laws come into effect. Any sufficient advanced incompetence is indistinguishable from malice. The mission of this panel must be to provide a no-holds-barred analysis of all the shortcomings that piled up to enable Butler to occur. An op order for the next administration to correct decades of drift from excellence. I know how difficult high-threat executive protection work is. One must be prepared, coordinated, and lucky every day. The bad guy only has to get it right once. There is no question that a failure of coordination, communications, training, and leadership failed America in Butler, Pennsylvania with tragic results. I'm honored and happy to help ensure that will not happen again. I think, and especially as we think the anniversary of the debacle that was Afghanistan, the theme of no accountability across all our agencies rings true, because no one has been held accountable for anything in Afghanistan or anything since. And I think a corollary is if we think back to the debacle that was Desert One, the attempted Iranian hostage rescue mission in 1979, ended terribly. 8 Americans dead, international embarrassment, didn't rescue the hostages. Congress took action, changed how the money is spent. Why? Because if you try to do a special operations mission, or if you're trying to do a protective mission while you're doing currency investigations, no, you can't serve 2 masters. They created the United States Special Operations Command to find the money and the personnel to focus on getting that mission correct. And if you think about it, the JSOC capability that the United States government has today is elegant and it's effective. And until you change the money issue and until you put people in charge that are serious about this business, we will continue to have the kind of embarrassments, both listed by Jason Chaffetz before, and we dodged a bullet. Donald J. Trump dodged a bullet. We cannot afford to have more of these.
Good morning. My name is Ben Schaefer. I'm a SWAT operator with Washington Regional SWAT Team that was tasked for presidential support on that day. I just want to take a moment to thank everyone for the opportunity to be here today as you examine the assassination attempt on former President Donald J. Trump in Butler, PA. Before I begin, I feel compelled to also echo those condolences for all the victims that suffered that day and continue to suffer because of those tragedies. Since joining the Marine Corps in 2004, I have deployed, fought, and been recognized for exemplary service and performance in both Iraq and Afghanistan. I've provided security services to the President of the United States and other high-ranking members in the United States government. I've protected diplomatic persons, high-net-worth corporate clients, media personalities, investigative journalists, and the general public. I continue that work today as a SWAT team leader and executive protection specialist. I've been recognized on numerous occasions for my high level of professionalism, proficiency, and knowledge of all security measures while working in those fields. As I analyze what happened in hindsight and real time on July 13th, there's a few points that I'd like to talk or mention that haven't sat well with me or I haven't been able to reason. Part of that is in the communication conversation of what happened that day and the abilities or lack thereof. The ability to communicate quicker between agencies is definitely a shortfall. That was not optimized in what we'd normally see in a presidential support mission. This all led to an obvious delay in communication when we were beginning to target and respond to the threat that was Mr. Crooks that day. The lack of coordination between tactical element leaders and the Secret Service left ground elements in the dark and prevented necessary time to prepare for specific venue considerations and needs prior to that event. All Overwatch, sniper, counter-sniper positions should have had direct communication with each other that day at that entire rally. Some of the technical difficulties that have already been mentioned that I'd like to echo is the lack of drone coverage or drone overwatch that day, which left many danger areas exposed and severely, and I say that again, severely, impacted the ability to secure the venue and the event itself. Other points of failure, other danger areas that have been noted, and I feel the need again to echo those, is the water tower that was located in the northeast section of the event. That's a major, if not catastrophic failure to not identify that that is a elevated, optimal, and opportunistic place for anyone with any kind of knowledge to wreak havoc on that event. The task that day, broken down, included local law enforcement's responsibilities that include traffic, parking, and access were their primary roles. State law enforcement handled crowd control, medical support to those in need. Due to the temperature that day, there were a lot of heat casualties, a lot of heat strokes, a lot of heat stress-induced issues. The local counter-assault teams were to neutralize and mitigate any threat to the former president. Local SWAT counter-sniper teams were to scan and hunt for anyone deemed a deadly threat to any member of the crowd or the former president. In conclusion to what I have to say today, there's no question that there were critical failures during the Butler event. It is important that we learn how and why this security failure occurred so that we can better provide safety and security to those high-ranking officials and the general public in the future. I truly believe Americans deserve that. Thank you for your opportunity to testify before you today. Happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much. This forum having come to order, I want to remind everyone that we will be going in 10-minute segments. Should there be a need to have a second round of questioning, we will then limit the second round of questioning to 5 minutes each. The first person who will start this out is the Honorable Andy Biggs.
Thank you, and thank you to everybody for being here today. Appreciate it. I want to start, if we're ready, if the video is queued, I want to show a short video, if we're ready.
Stunning new video tonight showing the moment Donald Trump's would-be assassin climbed onto the roof of that building just 2 minutes before he opened fire.
Yeah, look, there he is.
You can hear bystanders desperately trying to alert police. Authorities now using that video as part of the investigation.
Walk us through what you were seeing in the minutes before the actual shooting happened.
Well, there was a lot of people around the building that were complaining about some guy crawling up the building and then crawling up the roof.
Gentlemen, so we're going to bring him up for can we bring him up for a couple of minutes? You get ready, Rick Carmen. You get ready. The world will see a vibrant Republican Party.
Look, they're all pointing.
The Atlantic, maybe the Pacific.
Yeah, someone's on top of the roof. Look. There he is right there. Right there, see him? He's laying down. See him?
Yeah, he's laying down.
And look what happened to our country. Probably 20 million people. And you know, that's a little bit over that short. That short's a couple of months old. And if you want to really see something that says
I hope he's turning this way. Be careful, guys.
According to a former agent, Secret Service counter-sniper teams should have scoped out and advanced all those areas where there were potential threats beforehand and known what the line of sight to Trump could be.
The fact that somebody was able to get within 200 yards with a rifle and be on an exposed rooftop, be seen by other people there, be seen by where it should have been cameras and drones and many other things in place to watch for that, something broke down. That shooter with that rifle should have never been that close to the former president of the United States at a venue like this.
Thank you for showing that video. Appreciate that. And so we've seen aspects of those videos because those are public domain videos. One spectator was killed, and we express condolences to his family, Corey Comprador. 2 others were critically injured, David Dutch, James Copenhaver. And then narrowly escaping with his life was former President Trump. That's why we're here. And the timeline is probably too small for you to read, but I'm going to go over the timeline just briefly and with the experts here in just a second. But first, I want to acknowledge also our condolences to the 13 veterans killed in Afghanistan during that disastrous retreat. I also acknowledge our colleague Bob Good's presence today, his interest in this, appreciate his interest in this. Our former colleague Jason Chaffetz and Mark Morgan, we appreciate all of you being here today. So let's take a look at this from the local perspective. Ben, thank you for being here. Let's talk about the communications. Let's start there. Was there a central communications center in place?
Yes, there were. That was by the Butler Emergency Services Unit.
And typically, was the Secret Service? Did they have a person on the scene, a decision maker on the scene in case an emergency happened?
I believe that there were a Secret Service agent responsible for the scene. However, they were not, to my knowledge, co-located at the command center itself.
And so I want to make clear. So who was present in the communications command center that might have made decisions for Secret Service?
Secret Service, on my understanding, is that the information that was gathered by the command center, which would have been being operated by the Butler Emergency Services Unit and the commander in that capacity. He was responsible for relaying that information to a point of contact he had, and my understanding was that it was over a cell phone as opposed to in-person communications.
Is that normal to have a cell phone communication, or is there usually a body there that can make a decision?
In most security postures and events that I've been part of for these types of events, there is someone actually physically co-located for that reason. Due to the loss of cell phone service, which we experienced that day, a possible loss of radio communications that day. It's a very robust and fail-proof way to communicate because of the level of importance that's needed.
Let's put it this way. Were radios and communication implements offered to Secret Service by the local operators?
They were, yes.
And what was the form of the communication?
The form of communication would have been some type of encrypted law enforcement style radio.
And do you know, did the Secret Service avail themselves of that? Did they obtain those radios?
I believe they were offered, but I do not believe they were taken.
So they did not utilize the preferred mechanisms of communications that was offered to them?
That's correct.
Let's talk timeline for a second. So if we look at this timeline, it indicates to us, let me go 5:10, at 5:10 p.m., the shooter is identified as a suspicious person near the AGR building. Does that sound right to what you're understanding of the timeline?
Yes, sir.
And so at least some point, somebody had seen him by 5:10 p.m. That's an hour before the shooting. They adjudicated he was suspicious. And in testimony before the committees of Congress, they indicated to us that, when I say they, I'm talking Cheadle, Rowe, and Ray, the directors and interim directors of Secret Service and FBI. They indicated to us that there's a distinction between a suspicious person and a threat. And so you have a suspicious individual, you have a threat, there's an interim category as well. What's that interim category?
In our line of communications from a SWAT point of view and from a tactical point of view, our escalation of people that we encounter starts out as a suspicious person, then goes to a person of interest, and then from that level upgrades to what we refer to as a threat. And each one of those warrant a different response.
So the actual shooting takes place right about 6:11 p.m. So an hour elapses. How soon after the first identification of the shooter, which is at 5:10 p.m., did you? Well, before we get there, let's lay the foundation. What were you doing that day?
I was in a counter sniper role with one of my teammates in the southwest quadrant of the event center. Distance-wise, it was approximately 238 yards southwest of the podium and approximately 348 south-southwest of the shooter's final firing position.
And so he was not ever in your sector of responsibility?
Nor in my visual, nor sector, nor visual. I never had visual.
How soon after he's identified were you given information that, or did you hear information that there was a suspicious character that you should be alerted to?
Believe those text messages came across, and just to give some background on the text message tactics. So in this type of event, as tactical officers, we try to build redundancy in communications because it's so critical. We start out in a primary role, which would have been our radios that day, communicating on a designated channel amongst all the tactical operators. Because we were in support of the host agency, which would have been the Butler, the Emergency Services Unit, we also were running a secondary channel that was our local Washington Regional SWAT Team channel. On top of that, the snipers and counter snipers, or I should just say the counter snipers, there were no snipers involved in our chat, had set up another chat to be able to provide any type of pictures or any type of relevant media or anything like that that we'd have been able to crosstalk.
So did you ever see any pictures? Were any pictures ever sent to you?
They were. The pictures came across the chat at approximately 5:38.
So about 30 minutes after the shooter, then at that time he was a suspicious individual.
That's correct.
And when he gets up on the roof and he's crawling across the roof, is that what threat assessment would normally be made of that guy at that point?
Sure. I think it's important to mention that, from the time the original pictures were taken, the comment of him possibly having a rangefinder or that he was confirmed to have a rangefinder at that point would have automatically escalated him in our protocols from a suspicious person into a person of interest. And that would have warranted some type of either investigatory detention or a stop and question at that point when the rangefinder became a factor.
Ben, Mr. Shaver, at what point in that hour or before were you notified of the rangefinder, the use of a rangefinder?
Within minutes of the original information being passed. So I would say shortly after 5:38 p.m. or 17:38.
Thank you so much.
My time's expired. You'll bet.
Mr. Biggs, Mr. Schaefer, thank you so much. At this point, we will turn it over for 10 minutes with the Honorable Eli Crane.
Thank you. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Prince. I know you have a bit of a public profile, but I'm not sure everybody here understands the depth of your experience here. What was the name of the organization that you founded, sir?
Blackwater.
How many employees did you have at Blackwater when you ended up selling the company?
At peak of about 3,500 Americans deployed doing everything from very high-end executive security to aviation and training.
3,500. That's it's pretty large company.
Brigade size.
Yeah. With other protective companies that did executive protection around the world, how did you guys rack and stack? Were you one of the largest companies, one of the smaller companies?
I'd say we were the largest doing that. we never really intended to be in the security business. I started after the SEAL teams and built a training facility. SEAL teams have been using private facilities since the 1970s, and no one had done one on an industrial scale. And started, and then as the demand signal of 2 wars and all the gaps created by trying to take a conventional military into a counterinsurgency created a lot of demand signal, and so we responded by providing a lot of executive security and ended up doing most of the diplomatic security work for almost 10 years.
Yeah. Though there's some similarities between what the Secret Service does and what you had to do overseas, there are definitely some differences.
Sure.
Correct.
In fact, we interacted with the Secret Service whenever the president or some other senior person was coming over. In fact, before we took over security first for Paul Bremer in Iraq, the Secret Service came over to do a study if they wanted to handle it, and they didn't want to touch it at all because they are used to being able to shut down everything and create their own bubble. You can't do that in an active war zone, so that job fell to us, and we grew into that. It was, and that expertise also led us to doing a lot of training for other State Department programs where we'd had at least a dozen countries send their Secret Service equivalents that protected their presidents, and whether that's Lebanon, Colombia, Taiwan, a lot of places with active threats and very active, whether it's Sicarios or Hezbollah, we prepped those units to face that kind of threat. And, you know, we did it, we did 100,000 missions. No one under our care was ever killed or injured.
I want you to repeat that, sir. Did you guys ever lose a protectee?
No, we did not.
Thank you. You said something interesting on an episode of Sean Ryan that I saw a couple weeks ago. You said it's in, you know, thank God it was a 20-year-old kid and not a 10-man Hezbollah team. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Sure, because the fact that a 20-year-old kid could get his drone in the air, could get himself into a firing position only 140 yards away. 140 yards is point-blank range. My then 12-year-old son could have made that shot. Yep. And thank God that 20-year-old aimed at a headshot at President Trump, because if he'd aimed center mass, President Trump would probably be dead, because I don't think he was wearing plates. He wasn't wearing any kind of body armor that would have stopped that rifle round. And a 78-year-old man taking a gunshot wound to the upper chest is not going to go well. A Hezbollah team or ISIS or you name the terrorist organization that actually knows what they're doing would have been successful that day. And the Secret Service was nearly defeated by a 20-year-old, and we all, including Donald Trump, literally dodged a bullet that day.
So I want to double down on that real quick. In your opinion, in your professional opinion, is the Secret Service in its current form and leadership able to stop a threat like that?
President Trump was definitely deprived of resources that day for whatever their political reason. They had 1/3 the amount of agents covering him as were covering Jill Biden in the same region at an indoor event. She had 12 post holders covering her. Again, no statutory or constitutional authority for the First Lady. Donald J. Trump was had 4 Secret Service agents assigned. And I think even when you look at the debacle of a failure of the advance team to actually secure the perimeter and to deny the obvious sniper hotel locations where a bad guy is going to set up from, to the complete lack of coordination and communication, not communicating with the local law enforcement, not taking the radios of local law, come on, to even when shots were fired, the clumsy, unprofessional way of getting the protectee off the X. There was catastrophic failure across the entire enterprise.
Thank you. Mr. Bongino, I want to turn to you real quick. As somebody with a lot of experience in the Secret Service, is it correct, sir, that you, at this point, have members of the Secret Service whistleblowing and calling you right now to talk to you about the culture of the Secret Service?
There are so many. It's getting to the point now where I thank them and say, but I've already heard that from 10 other guys. And I bring that up because none of these problems are new. Anybody telling you that is lying directly to your face, and you better hope they're not under oath. Anyone is suggesting in a congressional hearing or elsewhere that these problems are new, the personnel problems, the logistics problems, the manpower problems, the technology problems. I just told you a sad running joke in the service when I was there. I'm gone since 2011. Last time I checked, it's 2024. It was yesterday's technology tomorrow. And other things here that are inexcusable that have been brought up before, like Ben and Eric just brought up. The communication failures are basic. This isn't like the Secret Service $1 million radio system that uses NSA-level encryption magically broke down that day. They literally handed them a radio they didn't take. This is why when Congressman Mills says, you know, borderline criminal negligence, you should take that seriously. What could possibly be your excuse to say, you know what, I don't really need to communicate with the law enforcement guys out there on the scene. We asked to, they had no obligation to be there. It's a Secret Service's job to protect the president. Out of a courtesy, they showed up. And you don't even have the respect of these local law enforcement people, respect for them to take the radio? I mean, where was the CP, the command post? The way this works, so everybody understands, or it's supposed to and didn't that day, for reasons still unexplained outside of, again, obscene negligence, any trip for a high-level protectee, you're supposed to have a command post that runs the whole trip at the airport or whatever. They'll communicate with everyone. But those individual sites, like in Butler County, have security rooms themselves, which are kind of mini CPs at each site. Where was it? According to what Ben said before, and from what I've heard, it was either not there or the locals were running it, offered communications, and the Secret Service, whose job it was that day to protect President Trump, said, we're going to pass on the comms. Really, you described it as catastrophic. He's 100% correct. Eric knows exactly what he's talking about. Just apocalyptic failure.
Mr. Bongino, in your opinion, is the Secret Service in a better spot today with Director Rowe in charge?
No, it's worse. And sadly, I'm glad this is all being recorded, because when something else happens, and I hope it doesn't, I pray to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, that I'm wrong. That you play this and go, look, that guy was crazy. You think this is the last incident, you're out of your mind. We have seen these incidents over and over. We saw the Georgia grenade incident with President Bush. They overtook the magnetometers. The Secret Service leadership in charge now with the exact same people. Exact same. Can you imagine a C-suite at a company that makes widgets? We find out that there's a design defect. The widget explodes and kills 10 people, and the CTO gets a promotion to CEO. You understand that's what happened here, correct? These are the same people. Kim Cheadle, the director, wasn't even fired. She was allowed to resign. She'll go get some cushy job somewhere, and her deputy, who is one of the guys behind these stupid waste of time things like agents wearing red ties on the detail. Because this actually happened, by the way. These people will tell you this under oath if you get the right people. He was concerned about the tie color of the agents on the detail because it seemed to imply he supported President Trump. Congressman Biggs wearing a red tie. You're wearing a semi-red tie. It has nothing to do with anything. This is the kind of stuff the Secret Service was actually wasting their time with while withholding CSU counter surveillance assets and counter sniper assets from probably the most threatened man on earth. If you can explain it, good luck, because that's not the agency I worked for.
My last question is for Ben Schaefer. In your opinion, Mr. Schaefer, why were counter snipers in AGR that had access to the entire building, from what we've been told, not able to see crooks crawling up the roof when we've seen several videos from the ground level taken by bystanders and individuals not even tasked to be doing security were able to photograph crooks wearing no camouflage, crawling on a white roof? Why were the snipers, the local snipers, not able to see crooks and dispatch of him?
I can only pass this knowledge through secondhand communications. I was not privy to that location or to survey that ahead of time. Although I have spoken to those individuals that were placed in that room that day, based on the depth of the room, their placements, and the limited field of view that those windows provided. They were pretty narrow, as most standard residential windows are held. The angle was too hard for them to see that far to their east, which if they would have been facing south.
Thank you so much. Appreciate my colleague Eli. With that, I'll turn over 10 minutes to the Honorable Matt Gaetz.
Mr. Prince, you're one of the people I trust most about global affairs. You're constantly assessing the threat environment and intelligence. And I guess my question to you is, because this has been laid bare and these weaknesses have been exposed, are you concerned that we're likely to face not another Crooks, but perhaps a threat like you described, a team from a foreign adversary, a terrorist organization, trying to expose and exploit the weaknesses that now we've seen?
I am very concerned. The inability of the Secret Service or the U.S. government writ large to adjust, to learn a painful lesson from that failure and actually make concrete changes. Because again, the fact that a 20-year-old nearly killed Donald Trump, and the failure to adapt to even yesterday's technology, let alone tomorrow's. And when you see the step change of the ability to deliver precision fires at extended ranges, the lessons being learned on the battlefield of Ukraine, the ability for small units to deliver devastating precision fire onto any target, whether it's the White House, whether it's a motorcade, whether it's a president outside or even inside somewhere, is significant, and I don't think they have any idea what's coming at them.
And what Mr. Bongino seems to have told us is they haven't learned the lesson. He's told us decade after decade we should not expect the lesson to be learned by osmosis. Mr. Bongino, I will have to draw on your experience in protecting folks. I have none, but I do have some experience in observing what a government agency does when they're not telling the truth and they're trying to hide something. And the pattern recognition always goes to some form of scapegoating. We saw it at DOD when people refused the vax, they were scapegoated and driven out. We saw it at FBI when whistleblowers talked about spying at school board meetings and at Catholic churches, they were driven out. And now I take note of the fact that certain people at the Pittsburgh field office have been put on leave. And I've also seen the story change where initially the Secret Service was blaming folks in local government, and then there was admission that there weren't appropriate responses to requests for additional manpower. So what I'd really like to do with you is bring us into that process, because Senator Hawley now has a whistleblower saying there was a manpower request that was coming out of Pittsburgh, and headquarters Secret Service was putting downward pressure on the local agents to try to reduce the intensity of that manpower request. So give Congress a little sense, how does that get developed? And then what should we think about the fact that someone is saying that headquarters was trying to get people to not make requests of enhanced protection?
Well, I can give you an example from personal experience. I saw Senator Hawley's tweet. The Secret Service is going to rely on this and what they're trying to do now, and you're accurate in your analysis about how this cover-up is starting to work. What they're going to say is, well, there was no real formal request made. But here's an example, and then I'll tie something to something that happened to me. Imagine you're working for a company, a public company. It's actual accountability, stock will tank or whatever. You can't make products that'll kill people. You'll go out of business. If you do, there's a penalty. But imagine you're told by your safety guy, you're the CEO, and your chief safety officer says 50 to 60 times, hey, again, this widget has a defect, and if we put this out, it's going to kill someone. And it's clear after the 50th time that the CEO doesn't care. So at the 51st time you tell the product blows up, the CEO's going to say, well, he didn't tell me yesterday. Well, he didn't tell you because he told you 50 times before and you ignored him. So what they're doing now is Ron Rowe, the acting director, who is the deputy director, the number 2, who is unbelievably, again, got a promotion out of this. A guy was murdered and someone got promoted, which is obscene and disgusting. He is part and parcel to this whole day-to-day ADPO, Assistant Director, Protective Operations, Deputy Director, Director chain that makes management decisions. When they tell you early on, we are not doing this for President Trump, Congressman. we're not doing counter sniper teams, we're not doing CSU. And then they say, well, on that day, we didn't deny assets. You didn't have to. You've been denying them for 4 years. I was told by a direct source, this is the quote, that at Mar-a-Lago, they were begging the DTD, the Donald Trump detail, begging for enhanced security. We can't secure this place like this. And one of the quotes from one of those three people I just told you about was, we don't secure nightclubs. Really? What if a nightclub owner runs for president? You don't secure you secure whatever the hell they tell you to secure. That's not your job. That is what happened here. And that's what they're going to rely on. And that's where you guys, I think, have had the guts to take this on. Do not let them fall back on euphemisms and word games where they go, well, that specific day we didn't say no to any assets. Have you in the past? How often? Matter of fact, how many counter surveillance teams have you actually dedicated? What percentage of Trump sites? How many CS teams? There's a story out there that was the first time counter sniper Secret Service assets were ever used at a Donald Trump site. So you're telling me your most threatened protectee had no professional Secret Service overwatch? As Ben showed, these guys are more than skilled and competent. They don't need the Secret Service to tell them how to do their job.
I think that gets to this intent question that Congressman Mills framed up perfectly at the beginning of our discussion. Congressman Mills says the key question here is whether this was your run-of-the-mill government incompetence or whether you see features of such just disregard for the duty at hand that you believe there's some malice. And in his opening statement, Mr. Prince says when the incompetence reaches a certain point, you can impute the malice to that. And what I think you have unique experience in is, well, like this culture of denying requests, like to Trump, or a circumstance where not even the Donald Trump detail, but the folks in the Pittsburgh field office who are not normally on the Trump detail were saying, hey, just based on this, we might need more, and they were discouraged from even making those requests, so they couldn't be denied. I think you can give us a lot of insight into the type of questions we need to be asking and of who to understand that culture, because like you think of the Secret Service, they're off with a number of protectees, yes, right, of all kind of different profiles and different, I guess, priority, for lack of a better term. And so, like, what should we think about imputing malice at a point in which Donald Trump, one of the most threatened people on the planet Earth, is having to endure these denials and this culture of limited protection while you're seeing other details, beefed up substantially?
I think, and I don't think I put this out yet, but I'll put it out there now. When I was there, it was definitely not a political enterprise.